When does a human being start to exist as a person? Is it legitimate to interrupt gestation at any point? This is one of those highly sensitive topics where most people tend to take opposing positions, and discussions can often turn into fights due to prejudices. Prejudice is a judgment made in advance, before knowing all relevant aspects. Our intention is to avoid those prejudices, present you with the most truthful information, and invite you to consider elements that you may not have thought of before, so that you can form a more comprehensive judgment. So, when does human life begin? When does the life of a human being begin? Although that's how the question is usually posed, the relevant issue is not when human life begins. The cells of your skin are alive until you get a wound. The cells of your bronchi are alive and damaged by smoking. The millions of sperm that a man produces and are destroyed daily, and the eggs that a woman releases each month, they are all alive. The relevant issue is at what point the product of fertilization can be considered a human being, a person. Let's see how this process unfolds. It all begins when the sperm enters the egg and their nuclei combine, resulting in the merging of DNA. Within 24 hours, the fertilized egg, called a zygote, divides for the first time. In about 4 or 5 days, there are already around 100 cells, all identical, forming a blastocyst. If these cells were to separate before this stage, 2 blastocysts would form, giving rise to identical twins. During the first week, the blastocyst begins to implant in the uterus. By the end of the second week, the implantation is completed. Some cells will form the placenta, and others will become the embryo. Nerve cells start to form at one end to create the neural plate, which will later develop into the nervous system. At 3 weeks, the embryo is about the size of a grape seed, and the foundation of the heart has already formed, beating for the first time at the size of a poppy seed. By the 4th week, the embryo resembles that of any animal and cannot be visually distinguished from that of a pig or a chimpanzee. Between the 5th and 6th weeks, nerve cells begin to show electrical activity, still disordered. The heartbeat can now be detected, still in the process of formation, and can be observed through an ultrasound. Between the 8th and 10th weeks, neurons proliferate and the cerebral hemispheres connect. The first reflexes appear. At 11 weeks, the stepping reflex emerges. When the feet touch the base of the uterus, the nervous system triggers an automatic response in the leg muscles. From the beginning and throughout this early period, the fetus is susceptible to spontaneous abortions, which can be due to imbalances in the possible mother's immune system, infections, diseases, or toxic substances in the environment, including alcohol and tobacco, or even stress. At 12 weeks, the fetus is 10 centimeters long. It already has a human appearance, although it cannot be said yet that it thinks or feels. From this stage on, it is not as susceptible to spontaneous abortion. At 16 weeks, the bones start to harden, the interdigital membranes disappear, grooves begin to form in the brain, and the cerebral lobes differentiate. The sense of proprioception develops, the fetus starts to recognize its own body. At 18 weeks, the blinking reflex begins. Around this time, the future mother can perceive the movements known as kicks or flutters. Between 18 and 23 weeks, the fetus starts to hear, smell, and taste. At 20 weeks, the thalamus, which connects the spinal cord to the cerebral cortex, is formed, but the cortex itself is not fully developed yet. By 24 weeks, the fetus could potentially survive outside the mother's womb, although it would need assistance with breathing and special care. Between weeks 25 and 29, the cerebral cortex forms, and at this point, the fetus can feel pain. The brain exhibits patterns of regular brain waves, which is why premature babies show very low brain activity. At 32 weeks, the brain can regulate body temperature and breathing. Around week 38, birth typically occurs, and when the umbilical cord is cut, the supply of nutrients and oxygen is severed, and the baby breathes air for the first time. Even months after birth, there is significant growth in synapses. The cerebral cortex continues to develop for several years. The sense of self develops around 18 months of age. The cortex continues to form even until the age of 25, and in fact, we continue to form new synapses throughout our entire lives. The difficult question is, what do we consider a human being? What characteristics are required to consider someone a person? Is it having consciousness and the ability to think? Or is it enough to have the capacity to feel, like animals do? Or perhaps it's simply having individual human DNA? There is no universal definition. The category of person is defined and debated in every society and context. For instance, Aristotle claimed that the soul entered the body 40 days after conception conception for males and up to 90 days for females. The Catholic Church followed Aristotle's teachings and, although it did not view abortions favorably, it did not consider them homicides until the 16th century. Shortly afterward, Nicholas Hartsocker speculated that there might be little men inside spermatozoa, suggesting that human existence predated conception, with women merely serving as incubators. St. Thomas Aquinas declared otherwise, stating that it was a gradual process. The fetus initially possesses a vegetative soul, then acquires an animal soul, and finally obtains a rational soul. Although the Church has not firmly stated at what exact moment a new person appears, since 1750, it punishes all abortions with excommunication from the moment of conception, which is now known to be when a new genetic code is formed. But then, according to this idea, are 50% of fertilized eggs that fail to implant unnoticed considered deceased individuals? And if the blastocyst separates and gives rise to twins, was the initial zygote one or two individuals? Perhaps it is at 6 weeks when the heartbeat of what will become the heart can be detected, or at 8 weeks when the first reflexes manifest, even though the fetus is still incapable of feeling, or at 12 weeks when it already has a human appearance. If it happens under certain conditions, the legislation in the United Kingdom guarantees abortion until week 24. Some even argue that it is an independent human being only when capable of breathing on its own. The truth is that it's not easy for us to reach an agreement and establish an absolute boundary. Humanization is a gradual process. The issue is far from simple. It's a complex topic with many implications, especially when we consider the situation of many women, including girls and adolescents. The United Nations Population Fund estimates that in developing nations, 20,000 minors give birth every day. Mexico ranks first in teenage pregnancies. According to the OECD, 1 in 5 pregnancies occurs in young girls who have not reached the age of majority. It is estimated that 95% of pregnancies in girls under 15 years of age are a result of sexual abuse. In Latin America, 24% of all pregnancy-related deaths are due to unsafe abortions. Many times, women without economic support, unprepared girls and teenagers, future professionals who have to give up their careers, or victims of rape and incest are forced to bring a child into the world. Is it really justifiable? Furthermore, cases of women experiencing miscarriages or pregnancies interrupted due to health problems, or even being compelled to have an abortion by someone else, and yet they are punished as if they had committed murder. It has been proven that restrictive laws do not reduce the number of abortions. They continue to be performed, but in conditions that endanger women's lives. In Latin America, the proportion of abortions is higher than in Western Europe. A crucial factor in this is the role of sexual education. For instance, in Norway and the Netherlands, sexual education starts from a young age, and they have the lowest rates of teenage pregnancies and abortions. The transformation from a fertilized egg to a human being is a remarkable process. This video is not intended to promote abortion. What we aim to promote is empathy and reproductive health. We could become a more just and responsible society if we are better informed. Being pro-life should consider not only the level of development of the embryo or fetus, but also the well-being, health, and rights of women. So, what do you think? If you liked the video, please give it a like, share it, and subscribe to the channel. Also, don't forget to comment if you'd like us to discuss a specific topic.